Would you say that filmmakers today are more about forcing a message than telling a good story?
That's a great question. I think there's quite a few that do that. I think telling a good story is important, whether it's a fun romp in the desert, or it's a story about a collapse of the housing industry, like The Big Short. I mean, wow, was that a message or was that a story?
Yeah.
I think it was both. I really do. Will we learn from it? Time will tell. I think set your watch to that. But I think as storytellers we have a responsibility. As writers we have a responsibility. A lot of people, I think well, if you look at the faith-based genre, it's all about the message. They don't care about the story as much as they do. It's the message. It's the message. It's the message. And that's cool. That's their thing. Sometimes the story's good. I'm not saying they're not always, but its message is the integrity and the point behind those. I don't know what different artists' intent is. I think some people go in with the intent to tell a good story and it becomes message heavy. And I think the other way around too. Sometimes people go in wanting to give a message and it ends up being a good story, or it doesn't. I think everybody as a storyteller has an intention, whether they're willing to show their hand or really, I think the good storytellers are able to do both without people realizing what's happening. I mean, I think when you can seduce an audience and kind of woo them along and really get them in your story, regardless of what story you're telling, whether it's Chariots of Fire. I mean, you talk about that, but that was a faith-based movie. People don't realize that Eric Liddell not competing on the Lord's Day and the background of his religious background. There was a lot of religious undertones in that, but it was a hell of a story and it was such a brilliant film. And, was it message-driven or was it story-driven? I think it probably was a good hand of both, in my opinion anyway. Look at On Golden Pond, Henry Fonda and Jane Fonda. I mean, there was a story there, but there was such a message about family and communication and how we drift apart with age and circumstances. But, I think there's a way to do both. But your question was, do I think people become more focused on one or the other? I think as we go through what we have in our times, I think a lot of people run to a message as storytellers. I think that's a big thing. I see a lot of short films and thesis films that are message driven, and they're not thinking about the story as much. But that's coming from a lot of film school students and newbies that they want to jump on a cause, and sometimes I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I think I think sometimes when you're dealing with sensitive issues or you're dealing with subject matters that we're still really feeling, the aftermath or the aftershock from, that's a good way to get some attention as a storyteller, to let people see what it is that you're trying to do as an artist. And sometimes you have to pick the scab a little bit.
You mentioned that Taxi was one of your favorite shows growing up. Was there a message with the TV show?
Poof.
Was Louis De Palma, did he have something that he was trying to tell us and we didn't see it?
I think he was just I always thought Danny DeVito was the youngest of probably 5 children. And he probably, like Arthur Spooner in The King of Queens, never really was heard growing up. And he was a bully. And, the funny thing was he was, 5 foot nothing, 100 and nothing, and, ran the roost. It was his show, it was his garage. And there was messages, but occasionally he would have a life lesson, but before they faded to black, he'd always slide back to old Louis, right?
That's true.
But the things that Judd Hirsch's character would go through with Tony Danza or Elaine, or Bobby Wheeler's character, I forget his name, the actor that passed. And my favorite was Jim Ignatowski, Christopher Lloyd's character. I mean, that was my favorite character. I watched the show for him as a kid. I thought he was hilarious.
And Latka.
Latka was great.
It's great too.
Yeah.
And Latka's wife, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, was there a message, I think you talk about people coming from all different backgrounds and all different, walks of life and being able to work together and encourage. Alex was always kind of that wise owl of the group. They went to him for advice, or sometimes he got himself in a pickle and Elaine would help him out, So I think it's neat when shows that we endear touch on us without hitting us over the head. And I think Taxi was a brilliant example of giving us little life lessons without ever feeling like we were being preached at. And I like shows like that. Don't hit me over the head. Let me enjoy the people, the circumstances, and go along for the ride. And you happen to give me a little life lesson here. All right, it was extra worth the time.
Whereas with Fantasy Island, there was always a message. Usually,
there wasn't there?
Once when Mr. Rourke was speaking to Tattoo at the end, there was some kind of a message that
show was on past my bedtime. I never got through the third act.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if they'll have the same message in the remake, but it looks like they've really rebranded it. I like the fact that they have a woman now as the Mr. Rourke character, I think.
Oh, okay.
It appears that way. I haven't seen it yet, but looking at some of the previews of it, I think they have a woman now leading the charge, which I think is great. But yeah, there were messages. I know there was about people finding love, or I think, wasn't it, again, forgive me, I think it was also a lot of people fantasies, chasing something that they're never going to get and being able to accept and love and appreciate what they truly had, as they think what kind of was the underlying tone of the show, wasn't
Sure.
it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
As an audience member or fan, do you feel that movies today are lecturing you more than they previously did?
Not the stuff that I watch. I don't allow myself to get into that. I'm very, time is precious. Our time on this earth is limited. If something doesn't get me early, I have an off button like the rest of the world. I just don't go down roads that I just feel if something's going in a direction that I don't personally agree with, or it just doesn't hold me, I don't wait it out. I'd rather go on and do something else. So I can't answer that. I just, I like shows that allow me to do the things that I want to do when I tell a story. Let people go where they haven't gone. Take them someplace they didn't know existed. Or let them just forget about their circumstances and enjoy something for 90 minutes or however long it is that they're watching. But, I always love it when there's something, there's always that saying when we work on something, we always try to leave the audience with something, more than an empty box of popcorn at the end of a show. I think it's a filmmaker's responsibility. I mean, no matter how ragtag or crazy a show is, I think show always needs heart. You got to have characters you care about and can relate to. So I think it's important that, as storytellers, we allow our audiences to relate to characters, or at least want to learn more about a character. And if we have some self-discovery during the ride, super, that's great. I don't look for films like that or projects like that when I watch something. But, I like nice surprises. As I said earlier, I think sometimes when you walk away from something, wow, I gave me a different point of view, or I never thought of that, or really interesting to see a different side from, of society that maybe I don't come in contact with all the time, and to see their upbringing, their point of view. Or, one of the shows that I'm absolutely in love with is, I'm blanking on the name right now. It's Snowfall. John Singleton created that show, and basically about the beginning of crack cocaine in the inner cities and how that started. I think that is just such a brilliant show. And I, having come up working with incarcerated youth during that time, we were really big in working with a lot of the juvenile inmates and in the prison system during those 80s and 90s. And I was very involved with a lot of the kids' lives that were going through, slinging dope and making crack and selling it and living in gangs and protecting their turf. And, here I am 25, 30 years later as a 50-year-old guy watching this show. It's like one of my favorite shows on TV. And that's something that I saw close up. It wasn't, living the life, but I was close to it and integrated with people that were. I just think, you talk about a show that, I think you learn so much about the mindset of, there's a lot of people that it's easy to look down on people that live a certain way and do a certain thing to make money, but you also have to look at the circumstances and what their surroundings are, and either you're selling or you're living on the streets broke, or you're selling or you're going to die, because there's a lot of people that got pulled into it that you had to choose an allegiance. So a lot of the people that got involved in that, they didn't really have a choice. And a lot of people, it's good to remind people where things come from I mean, I think there's some interesting roads they go down with the CIA funding some of that to kind of do their own thing, and that's all, you know, if you're into that, that's cool. I mean, I don't take one side or another on that, but I love the show because I care about the characters. You know, we meet Franklin, and he's this young kid who lives in the hood who gets brought into this underworld, and he becomes a kingpin of moving narcotics into the not only the inner city but our world. And, you know, stories like that fascinate me. And I think a lot of people get that from shows like Narcos and other shows. I haven't seen that one, but, you know, sometimes there's message, you know, there's interesting things that come from those about relationships and loyalty. And, you know, sometimes I can get inspired by a show like that has nothing to do with what I'm dealing with on a day-to-day basis, but it reminds me of the importance of loyalty when I think of our film crew, or I think about the people that we work with, or our friends, or our family. You know, so it's nice when those little things happen when you watch a show that you don't expect it from.